to the Talent Optimization Podcast, the go-to podcast for CEOs and HR professionals wanting to bridge the gap between the strategy and tactical implementation of talent optimization within their organizations. Through interviews, predictive index, and personal experience, your host, Traci Scherck, helps you discover the facets of talent optimization from both a CEO and HR perspective to truly create the dream team for your organization. Are you ready? Let's get started.
A lot of people have gone further than they thought they could because someone else thought that they could. That is a great quote from Zig Ziglar and completely kicks off today's episode on coaching. So welcome to Talent Optimization. My name is Traci Scherck, and I am your host here and Chief Talent Officer here at Elevated Talent Consulting. And we are thrilled to have these conversations about coaching and what that specifically means in our organizations. And we are in February of 2022. It's like, where did this time go, correct? So with that, we spent the last month of January talking all about mentoring programs inside of our organizations. And we heard from many of our listeners really a question about what is the distinction between coaching and mentoring. So the first thing I wanted to do is kind of name what that distinction is, because so many times they are used interchangeably. So coaching is development-focused relationship with a specially trained individual who provides guidance to a client on their goals and helps them reach their full potential. Right? So these are who the coaches are. Coaches are typically certified. There's lots of certification bodies that are out there. But at the end of the day, the coach is there to get the individual results, right? So when I'm coaching leaders and HR professionals, we guarantee that you will feel more confident as a leader and have that ability to be able to reach those business results, because part of it is who you are being in the conversations and in the interactions in your specific role. So that's really what a coach is. Now, what is a mentor, right? What's this distinction between a coach and a mentor? So a mentor is developmentally focused relationship with a domain relevant mentor who passes on their skills and experience to the mentee. So they typically will function in a reactive capacity. They're responding to issues as they arise, right? So mentors are, for the most part, typically inside of organizations. Now, we've seen a lot of mentoring that's starting to happen outside of organizations. But a lot of the programs we talked about in this last month were those internal mentoring programs, right? There's formal programs and there's informal programs. And with that, the key here is, what are those specific results that you're getting from that mentoring relationship? Coaching allows you to see what your brain is thinking. And I think that this is incredibly important. So both coaches and mentors are not meant to give you the answer. A lot of times in mentoring, that will happen a bit more, but in coaching, it's really about how do we create the space to give an individual that space to allow their brain to think and make those decisions on their own. So that's one of those key distinctions between coaching and mentoring. So what makes a great coach or mentor? And I love this question because as we develop these programs inside of our organizations, it's, hey, who do we choose to do this? Even if we're choosing to say, hey, we're going to bring in coaches to coach individuals inside of our organization, whether it is our CEO, whether it is individuals on our leadership team. And these are typically group programs or one-on-one programs. But what that coaching does is that allows the individual to take a step back from the day-to-day things that are happening and focus on how they are being in those specific relationships and interactions. Many times, and most of the time, the coaching is outside of the organization, whereas the mentoring is inside of the organization. And the key to this is the fact that many times talking with someone inside the organization can have some detrimental impacts to it. It can have some great ones as well, but that's one of those key distinctions. So here's the thing about what makes an individual a great coach or a mentor, right? Is they are willing to meet the coachee or the mentee where they are at and work with them to get to those specific goals. Now, one of the things we so often miss, and I find this so often when I'm working with HR professionals inside of organizations, is most HR folks have never been coached before, and they don't know what coaching means. And as I've brought HR managers and leaders into coaching programs inside of our organization, what I find is they want me to be a consultant to them versus to coach them, right? And there's nothing wrong with needing a consultant or a mentor. There's a very valuable place for that. But the distinction of what is a coach? And the best way to figure out how to coach someone else is to be coached yourself, right? So let's just talk a little bit about kind of, hey, if I'm going to be coached, what do I need to bring to the table to ensure that it's going to meet those business results for the organization, but also for me personally, right? One of the things that we promise our coachees in our programs is that we guarantee that they will feel more confident as a leader when they leave the program. Right? And how do we do that? We do that through a number of different ways. But first and foremost, we ensure that the individual is ready. So here's some key things to think about with that specifically is one, we are specifically looking at what specifically does this individual need? Do they need that thought partner? And they need to come in knowing that. So often I have individuals come in and say, hey, Traci, I really just need help with how do I navigate these conversations with my leadership team? I'm not really sure on how to enroll them. And I'm just used to telling them what to do. And nobody's listening to me anymore. So, I know what needs to happen, but how do I enroll them in that? And that's where we start to have conversations about how do I get curious? We have a couple tools that we use in our coaching. One of them is our curious questions. One of my favorite is I wonder what is on their plate that I don't yet know about, right? We have no idea what is going on in someone else's life. We have no idea if there is, if they broke their tooth last night. We have no idea if they just had a huge win with a family member or a friend or something like that. And when we can get curious about what's going on with them, it opens up that trust, right? So that we can have those key conversations. So one of the things for you as a coachee or a mentoree is knowing what you want out of that relationship and naming that up front so that you can absolutely receive that through those conversations. Another one is, to know where you are in your career development and in your organization. So are you someone who's really looking to say, hey, I'm looking to be promoted within the organization, or I'm really looking to create greater impact, and I'm not doing that right now. So what is it about me that's specifically stopping those key things from happening? And then the next is knowing specifically when you're having these conversations with potential mentors or coaches to say exactly what you need so that you get exactly what that is. So now that we've had that conversation about, hey, if you're going to be coached, what specifically is it that you need out of a coach, right? So we're going to flip the table a minute, because guess what? In HR, we are an and both almost all the time, right? So, and we need to know, when do we put on the hat for our organization and when do we put on the hat for ourselves personally, right? So now that we talked about, hey, if you're going to be coached, what are those three things, which is, hey, where am I at in my career progression and where do I want to go? That's A, right? B is, what specifically do I need? So is it that I need more confidence when I'm having conversations? Is it that I need to, be really self-aware of what I'm specifically doing and how that's coming across? Is it that I need to learn how to enroll others? Is it that I need to learn how to say no so I don't have too much on my plate, right? Like, what is that? And then the third is really looking to say, hey, if I'm going to choose a coach or a mentor, what in them do I need that's going to allow me to grow the most in this period of time? Okay, so that's for you. Now let's flip that and say, hey, in HR, a lot of times you're setting up these programs inside of your organization, and your goal is to do a couple things. One, work with your executive team to know inside and out what is the business strategy and how are we going to achieve that business strategy with results, right? So what are business outcomes we're looking for? This people strategy that we're creating, coaching and mentoring is a huge part of it, because it rises the people inside of our organization so that they can meet those business results. Oh, and yeah, we're still kind of in this great resignation, right? So it's going to increase employee engagement. It's going to help us with specifically our succession planning. It is going to allow us to train our new managers. It's going to be something that could be incredibly beneficial for our high potentials. And again, a caveat on high potentials. Sometimes we have individuals in our organizations that have things that are going on at home that may not necessarily seem like high potentials right now because they're in a cycle of their life where the home life is needing them in a much greater degree right now, but then they'll flip back and be 100% bought into work, right? We kind of all have these cycles. So knowing where an individual's at is super helpful. But coaching, guess what? We bring our whole selves to work and it's all the same pot of soup. So if something's going on at home, you know it's coming into the workplace. And if it's going on in the workplace, you know it's going home. So when we're coaching and mentoring individuals, more so coaching, what we are doing is we're allowing them to build those skill sets to be resilient, but also to know how to take care of themselves so that they can be that best version of themselves in all the situations that come forward to them. So these are all those benefits and reasons why we would want to bring coaching into our organization. And again, we always want to ensure that what is the problem that we have and that we put the right solution to that problem so that we can meet our business outcomes. So for those executives listening in and HR folks listening in, as you're designing these programs, really want you to think about what exactly does the business need to support the individuals to get to the business results, right? Those specific outcomes, because that, my friends, is your people plan. And it's a beautiful thing to put in practice and to make happen. Now, here's the other thing we know. Most HR folks have never been coached in their life, right? And I'm going to tell you a story for a second. So I was very, very grateful early on that I was given the opportunity to do some coaching with, it was called the Center for Authentic Leadership in Atlanta. And Gene Smith was such an amazing coach. And it was mostly group coaching. And what I learned within that group coaching, one of those key things was, guess what? We're all trying to figure it out as we go. And I know that so often when we are inside of our organizations, it's like, man, I've got to have this figured out ahead of time. I have to know exactly what's happening. And you know what? Most of us are figuring it out as we go. That imposter syndrome that will come up, especially as you level up through your organizations, is a real thing. And when you have a coach to work through that, your confidence will increase along with that. And the reason why I bring that up is without that experience, I would have never been able to coach and be as effective inside of the organizations because I hadn't had that experience. And so one of those key things that I think is really important is that anything you're implementing inside your organization, you've experienced and you've done yourself. It's one of those kind of core principles as we drink our own Kool-Aid here at Elevated Talent Consulting is, we are coached and, we do coach. And that's one of those things is as you're implementing these programs inside your organization, have you been coached? So here's something that's really important. And I'll link to a Forbes article that talks about this. And it's talking about the pivotal role that we as HR professionals and business leaders play. Because as HR professionals, we are asked all the time to coach our leadership team, to coach our executives on succession planning, on whether it is a new program that we're bringing in. Mental health is a huge one. I mean, how we navigate COVID-19, there's a tactical side to it, but there's also a strategic side. And so often we have to coach our leaders into, kind of getting out of this very, very task-focused mindset and stepping back in and saying, okay, what do my people need to be successful in this role so that we can meet our business results? Because it's not always perform all of the time. There's a cycle to this, and how they are being in that is going to have individuals love them or not. Let me give you an example. I had my hair done yesterday. I know, very exciting, but those things are important. So as I'm sitting in the chair, as any good hairdresser does, we're cracking up the entire time. And she's telling me a little about, a couple of folks in her life. And she's like, We all have some incredible war stories, right? And we've all had that boss. And so she's telling me about this individual who had a boss that was this twerp that, kind of came in. I know, I feel like I'm back in the 80s talking about twerps, right? Anyway, so as we're chatting and she's talking about, this boss who is in her 30s and is very task focused, but very, very demeaning in what she is saying to these individuals. And guess what? We're not motivating them, right? And this is where a coach can come in and talk about the being of an individual and how we can incentivize and enroll them in the things that they're doing and really meeting them specifically where they're at, right? And that's something that becomes incredibly important, that as we rise in leadership and in our coaching of others, we have to know where our own blind spots are and be self-aware to what that is. Now, we've threaded the difference between mentoring and coaching throughout. Coaching is going to be able to address something like that. Mentoring is more about, how do you start up a new department? How do you step into it? What are the specifics inside of this, or sometimes the politics in the organization versus how are you being in your interactions with others? And so if you have not yet, experienced coaching, we have an amazing coaching program that we offer once a month that actually starts. So we have another one starting in February, but we just really wanted to kind of point out to you that those tools that you learn in coaching help you learn about you. And if you're going to create a coaching culture, you can't create a culture of anything if you first have not yet experienced it. So as we close out today's conversation, one key actionable takeaway for our executives listening in is really to think about what are those business outcomes that you're looking for inside your organization, and who are those key people or key positions that really could use a coach to allow them to take their departments that much further, but also themselves personally, so that they can inspire that greatness and inspire those key outcomes. And you know what? That may be you, right? That may absolutely be you. And for our HR listeners listening in, the majority of you have never been coached. Find coaching for yourself, wherever that may be. There's thousands of them out there right now, right? But one of those key things that we talked about is that distinction between coaching and mentoring. And there's times where you can find a coach that's certified who also has been through it in your specific domain, which is human resources. And someone who has done both of those knows when to put the coaching hat on, when to put the mentoring hat on, and when to very rarely put that consulting hat on, right? So if that's something that's really interesting to you, that you want to dip your toe in and try out, again, we have our coaching program starting, and I would love to have you join us. Again, that guarantee that we have is that you will feel more confident as a leader throughout that program. And things like, hey, what are those curious questions that we can ask to ensure that we're enrolling our team, but also we're not making rash decisions that leave certain managers alienated? I know I've had several throughout my career, right? And we just want to ensure that you have that space to have your brain think in front of you and see it, so you can consciously make the decisions that's going to better you personally and professionally, but also that's going to move your organization forward to hit those business results. So with that being said, happy February. Thank you so much for joining us. We cannot wait to see you again, have you listen in again next week. And I can't wait to see you in our coaching program. Have an amazing first week of February.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Talent Optimization Podcast. You'll find more tools and resources for CEOs and HR professionals looking to bridge the strategies versus implementation gap of talent optimization at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. We've also created a free, valuable resource for you to begin bridging the gap called the Talent Optimization Foundation Membership Program. You can access it for free at elevatedtalentconsulting.com/foundation. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode to learn more about talent optimization and creating a dream team for your organization.